today is a Monday, November 16th. So we will do our last books of the Bible this week. So that means we are going to finish all 66. And so I know it looks like it's a lot, but it's a lot easier this week because a lot of them are first and second. So this week we're starting with Hebrews, then James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Jude, and then Revelation. Again, Hebrews, James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Jude, and Revelation. That's your books of the Bible this week. That's our last list. After we finished our lesson on Joseph last week, remember he had told his father to come and all his brothers to come live in the land of Egypt. The Pharaoh had gave them the land of Goshen as their home in Egypt. And so remember, that's where the Hebrews were. They had left the promised land and now they live in Goshen in Egypt. So Joseph died, his family died, but the Hebrews were still there. They were descendants. They were the family of Joseph and his brothers and everything. And a new Pharaoh came, and this Pharaoh did not like the Hebrews. They were more than the Egyptians, and he was afraid that one day the Hebrews would turn on the Egyptians. So he decided to force the Hebrews into slavery. He made them slaves. He made them work hard and to build cities and do all kinds of things for the land of Egypt. And so he put taskmasters over them who treated the people horribly. They were mean to them. They were brutal to the people. But although the Hebrews were going through this, the Lord increased them. God continued to increase the numbers of Hebrews. And so Pharaoh thought he was going to decrease the numbers, meaning make the Hebrews less people. But instead, God made more babies to be born. And so Pharaoh decided that he would get rid of those male babies and he would throw them into the river. He tried to get the Hebrew midwives to do it, but they didn't do it. So he got his soldiers to do it. And unfortunately, they did harm some of the babies. And so it was a tough time, but God would deliver his people. He didn't forget about his people and all that they were going through. So remember, there was a family and they had a little baby boy. The mom's name was Jochebed and the dad was Amram. They had a sister named Miriam and a brother named Aaron, and then the little baby. So they tried to hide the little baby as long as they could. But once he started growing and getting bigger, they couldn't hide him any longer. So the mom made a basket and she put him in the river, and just prayed that the Lord would just keep him. But Miriam, the sister, stayed nearby to watch to see what would happen to her little brother. And so someone came to the river and it ended up being Pharaoh's daughter, the princess. She came, and when she saw the baby, she knew it was a Hebrew baby, but she looked at him and had compassion towards him, and she wanted to take him as her own son. So that was the Lord that worked on her heart to have compassion on the baby. So remember, though, she needed someone to nurse the baby, meaning to give milk to the baby. So Miriam was nearby. So she went and said, hey, I could find someone, which she went and found her mother, which was the baby's mother. And so Moses' mom was able to have him, until he was old enough to go and live in the palace with the princess and Pharaoh. And they named him Moses. So that's where we'll pick up today on our story on Moses. So Moses grew up in the palace. He was pretty much a son to the princess, and Pharaoh would be his grandfather. Although Moses was a Hebrew, and we know his mom and dad were Hebrews, and they were, the slaves, he was able to grow up in the palace. And so Moses, God blessed him to have a good life in the palace. And although Moses was away from his people, the Hebrews, he still had a desire to help them. He knew that he was a Hebrew, and he knew how his people were being treated in Egypt. And so although, Moses lived in the palace and all of that, he still thought about his people. He didn't forget about who he was, a Hebrew, and he wanted to help them out of slavery as much as he can. So one day when Moses was about 40 years old, he went out to the area where the Hebrews were working as slaves. And so when he got there, he saw one of the taskmasters. Remember, those were the ones put in charge of the slaves, and he was beating a Hebrew slave. And so this made Moses angry because remember, he's a Hebrew. He wants to help his people. So when he sees this taskmaster, hurting his people, Moses gets out of his chariot and he went and he goes and he kills the Egyptian, the taskmaster. He killed him. So now it was great that Moses wanted to help him out, but it wasn't good for Moses to kill the taskmaster. That's not the way he should have handled that. But he did. And so he killed the man. And so Moses hid the body of the taskmaster so that no one would see, thinking no one saw. But we know, first of all, God sees everything. And even when we think somebody doesn't see us, somebody is watching somewhere. So never think that you can do sneaky things or bad things and no one sees. First of all, God sees, and God sometimes puts people in place to where they will see as well. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, so Moses tried to hide the body of the taskmaster to cover up what he had done. So he went back to the palace. So the next day, Moses comes out again to go and check on his people. He's like, let me go check on my people and see what's going on with them and to see what he could do for his people. This time when he goes, he sees two Hebrews fighting one another. So he gets out of his chariot and he's like, what are you doing treating your own Hebrew brother like this? And so they look at him, the Hebrews, and one of them says, and who are you? They said, I suppose you think you are our prince and our judge, or do you plan to kill us like you did the Egyptian yesterday? So Moses was frightened because he realized that people knew what he did. He thought he covered it up and hid the body and no one would know. But no, whenever he approached these Hebrews, one of them says that. They said, you're going to kill us like you killed that taskmaster? So Pharaoh was afraid. Eventually, word had got to Pharaoh what Moses had done, how he killed the taskmaster. And remember, the taskmasters work for Pharaoh. So when Pharaoh finds out that Moses did this, he was really upset with Moses. He wanted Moses to be arrested and executed. But Moses hurried and left Egypt. He fled Egypt and went to a city called Midian. Moses is now in the land of Midian. And so, although, he had good intentions by, wanting to help his people, he just went about it the wrong way when he killed the taskmaster. And so I'm sure Moses learned from that and he knew he had done wrong. And so he should have never killed the taskmaster. But because we make a mistake, it does not stop God's plan for us. And so Moses may think that it's over. He messed up. He's not going to be able to help his people. He's in Midian. But this is actually just the beginning of what God will do with Moses. And so sometimes we may mess up and we may make a mistake, but God will forgive us. And we just continue on serving him like we were before. And so Moses had to go to Midian, and he ended up meeting someone named Jethro, and Jethro gave Moses a job as a shepherd, and Moses also married one of Jethro's daughter. So Moses stayed in Midian as a shepherd, working for Jethro for 40 years. So he was 40 whenever he went to Midian, and he was working in Midian for 40 years. So that alone made Moses think that it was over. He's like, I've been here for 40 years. I'm 80 years old now. He's like, there is no way God will use me to help my people out. But little did Moses know, God still had a plan for Moses. God still would use Moses to do great things. And although Moses felt like God shouldn't use him or that it was too late, no, this was the perfect time for the Lord to use Moses. And so God's plan will prevail, and God always does his things on his time whenever he's ready for it to happen. And so it might take a long time, it might be a short amount of time, but the Lord works on his schedule, the way that he wants to do things. And so So during the time that Moses was in, Midian during those 40 years, the old Pharaoh had died. And there was a new Pharaoh that did come to the throne, but this Pharaoh was worse. He was, you thought that other Pharaoh was bad because they made the people slaves. This new Pharaoh was very hateful towards the Hebrews, and he was more cruel and mean to them. And so the people, the Hebrews, that they were tired. They cried out to the Lord, and they were like, God, please deliver us. Please help us and free us from this slavery in Egypt. And God heard the Hebrews' prayer, and God remembered his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he looked upon the children of Israel, the Hebrews, and God looked at Moses in Midian, and he said, it's time. And God was ready to use Moses to help the Hebrew people. Remember, Moses had a heart to help the people. God knew that about Moses. God put that in Moses. And now God heard their cry and their prayer for them to be delivered out of Egypt. And God was ready to free them from Egypt. And he was going to use Moses to do it. And so tomorrow's lesson, we will get to that, how God will appear to Moses and what he will tell Moses. And this is exciting. This is one of my favorite Bible lessons. So this will be good. So that's our Bible lesson for today on Moses, how he had to flee out of Egypt and he's in Midian, but God still was going to use him.